I'm Eric Johnson, one of the board members and big fan of Southern Documentary Fund, also part of Trailblazer Studios. Um, and before we get going formally, just really quickly, if folks would be willing to introduce themselves and where they are, just quickly, I'm going to call on folks since it's always hard on Zoom to know when to go. So in the order that I see you, let me make sure there's not more than one of you. Yes, John, can you just introduce yourself and tell us where you are?
Yes, my name is John V. I am in Cary, North Carolina. I hope you can hear me.
Yep, very good. Welcome, John. And how about David?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Dave Casper. I'm living currently in Asheville.
Great. All right, we can't hear you so well, but I know you're in Asheville, so we're happy for you. It's a good spot. All right, something was happening with your mic, but we got part of that. Welcome. Devin, where are you? Can we get a quick intro from you, Devin?
Hi, sorry, my connection got interrupted. My name is Devin. I'm an editor living and working in Atlanta, Georgia. Happy to be here, and thanks for hosting this.
Good. Welcome. Tinu, you are next on my screen.
Evening, everyone. My name is Tinu Dever, and I am a documentarian based. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm currently working on my first feature-length documentary, This Belongs to Us. I'm an SDF, Emergency Research and Development grant recipient, hopefully a production grant recipient, but no pressure. Y'all were giving us anxiety last week with that countdown. I'm like, we know it's due. We know the application's due. Y'all don't have to tweet it every single day. Like, we know.
Yeah.
But
I talked them out of coming and knocking on everybody's door. I told them that was too much.
But glad to be here and grateful for all of SDF's support.
Great. Welcome.
And they're my fiscal sponsor. I forgot about that too. So shout out.
Beautiful. Elijah, you're up next if you're available.
Can you all hear me?
We can.
Well, I apologize. I'm currently on the road because I'm ever busy. Proud to be director of at least one project that's sponsored by SDF, who is such an amazing organization. And I run a small media company based in Hillsborough, North Carolina. So I'm in that area. Grateful to be here and grateful to see all of y'all.
Awesome. Gregory, you are next.
Good evening. My name is Greg Henley, and I'm based in the Atlanta area.
Great. Two from Atlanta. Welcome, Greg. I was going to call you Greg, but didn't. I don't know you that well, so
thank you.
I didn't want to offend. All right. How about Robin?
Hello, everybody. I'm here out in the countryside of Kentucky, and I'm kind of new to SDF, and so grateful. Also have a feature-length documentary, Ripples and Pools, almost finished, so this will be of great interest. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Welcome. Larry?
Well, howdy, everyone. Larry here in Moorhead, Kentucky. I've done a couple of historical documentaries and certainly looking forward to this little Zoom meeting we're having.
Excellent. Well, happy to have you, Larry. Elva? Elva, are you able to introduce yourself?
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay. I'm in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I've done a number of documentaries, but I've been working on one now for 9 years, and I'm absolutely stuck on taking another step towards finishing it and editing it.
Well, welcome and God bless you for the long haul there. But you're amongst friends and family, and we understand. And believe it or not, we know of longer than 9 years.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay. Oh, people, my screen shifted. Let's see, who have we? Obed?
Yes, hello. I'm trying to get more some lighting, but I can introduce myself.
Sure.
Like I've been familiar with Southern Documentary Fund. A couple of weeks ago, I was part of the information session. My name is Obed. I am Haitian. I've been living in Arkansas for 2 years and a half now. I went to school there, did my master's degree in journalism, and recently graduated and have made 2 documentaries. Last week, I was at the Hot Spring Film Festival with my latest documentary. That was a great moment. So I'm very happy to be here. I have to say, I didn't like at least editing, but I feel like this is part of my job, and I was very excited to join today to learn more from experience. So thank you for having me.
Great. Glad you're here. And Michael?
My name is Michael Spear. I am currently living in Los Angeles, California, but for the past several years before that in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I'm interested, I've started to make a documentary, which I just have an outline for. And when I was living there, and still want to go forward with that. So I'm just here to see the whole editing process and take part.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, glad everyone's here. Dana, can you introduce yourself? I'm going to save Christopher and Bonnie.
Sure. I'm Dana Collins. I am the communications manager for Southern Documentary Fund. So I'm the one who was posting those countdowns you didn't like. So
I'll give you her address later.
yeah. And I am actually not in the South. I'm located in Kansas City, Missouri currently.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Dana, for all your help, especially with the newsletters have been great. Just keeping the energy going and seeing all the great things. So awesome. Well, I'm about to be quiet, but just wanted to greet everyone on behalf of the Southern Documentary Fund, and also introduce my good friend, Bonnie Cutler, who I have been coercing into doing this for a while, and just happy, she's available and willing to do this, and glad you're all here as well. Bonnie is too humble to brag, so I'm her bragging agent, but Bonnie's an extremely talented editor, and I mean that on the side of the physical part of editing, but even more so on the storytelling and the understanding story and helping to uncover story, which is so much a part of any project, but especially a documentary. And her work as an editor and a story consultant is absolutely invaluable, because I think everybody here recognizes that obviously everything you shoot is important. And then once you have it all there, determining if this is really a story, and what's critical and what needs to stay and what needs to go, and that sort of thing, and how to weave different aspects. So that all will be covered, and there'll be plenty of time for you all to ask questions. But this is going to be a very conversational format, initially between Chris and Bonnie. Chris, I'll have Chris introduce himself and then kick things off. But I think it's going to be really enjoyable for everybody. And so I will be quiet and let Chris kick it off with Bonnie.
Thanks, Eric.
Cool. Thanks, Eric. Hi, everyone. My name is Christopher Everett, and I'm the program manager with the Southern Documentary Fund. I know a few of you all over the past few weeks for the grants have hit me up about stuff about grants. So here I am. But this is a conversation that I'm very excited about. I'm a documentary filmmaker as well. And, I've been talking to Bonnie for the past month, and, she's been giving me a lot of great insight. And I'm like, man, I can't wait to get this conversation going, because I know you guys probably have some of those same questions also. So let's just go ahead and get it going. I have my notes, my notebook right here as well. So I'll be taking some notes along the way too. But thank you, Bonnie, for joining us today. We'll go ahead and get it started. I think I know a thing that I've dealt with over the past few years, and I think a lot of filmmakers have dealt with this, of constantly shooting all the time, and just constantly shooting. I know I've met filmmakers who have spent like 8 years just continuously filming. And I know when we had a discussion not too long ago, and you brought up the thing about getting a story consultant. And I never thought about that before until talking to you recently. Let's talk about that a little bit. Not only are you a great editor, but also story consultant as well. So let's just talk about why is it important to have a story consultant on your documentary project? And how does that just help with the overall editing process?
Well, I think first of all, when we make a film, we get so close to our characters and to our story that sometimes you can't really decide what's important and what's not, or what emotional weight something might have, how well something may play on camera or not play on camera. And I think bringing in an outside person could be really helpful to narrow down, some really basic stuff about storytelling. First of all, it comes down to 3 very basic things, your setup, your conflict, and your resolution. I mean, if you want to think of it in the simplest of terms, that's how you should really think about your story. And sometimes we tend to get overwhelmed. I mean, I've been in a position, in my much younger years where I've gone out and shot, way, way, way too much stuff. And a lot of it ends up on the cutting room floor. And I think the tendency is when you shoot or direct your own stuff, you want to use everything. You want to find a way to use everything. And you may miss out on the little, I like to call it emotional gold. There are things in footage, like a nod, or the blink of an eye, that head turn, these simplest little things that I think when we're super, super close to having filmed something or having directed somebody to film something, that we don't see. And I think an outside editor could come in and really look at your footage in a completely different way and show you how to use things that you may not have thought, oh, that's just a person driving away. Well, no, actually, look at this. He's about to get a flat tire, or somebody's waving him down, or, there may be something else that's happening that you just don't think is important to the story, but actually can add kind of a certain emotional texture to something. So I think it's important to bring someone on that basically could be, a fresh set of eyes, essentially. And also help you set up and think about your story in these really, really, broad ways. Write down, help you write a treatment or an outline. And just, I think it just really could get rid of a lot of the gunk that you may have in your head from having shot so much stuff. So I'd say that's probably the most advantageous thing for a story consultant to come on.
Cool. I guess I know you said, when Eric was introducing you, having years of experience, I guess give us a little bit of a background of some of those projects you worked on, and how did you get into this and everything?
Oh, okay. For some reason, I don't know why, I always was fascinated with the idea of editing. I didn't even really know what it was, but I just liked the idea of pictures and movement and music and story. So when I was in college, I went to Temple University in Philadelphia, and I majored in communications there. And I took a couple, your general filmmaking classes, and that's when I really, really got hooked. And I decided that editing was definitely what I wanted to get into. Now, of course, you don't step right out, graduate college, and then get a job as an editor. So I was, a gopher, I was a researcher, I was, anybody's right-hand person. And I worked really, really hard and volunteered to do everything. And I was lucky enough to get in with a very small production company in Princeton, New Jersey. And from there, it kind of snowballed. I started making contacts with some local filmmakers, and they helped me kind of get started with some audio editing, and it just kind of spiraled off from there. And then in the past, I'd say, I don't know, 20 years or so, God, I always hate thinking about how old I am. But anyway, been doing stuff for PBS and for Discovery. I worked for National Geographic for about 12 years. I worked with Trailblazer Studios, who a lot of you may know, and did some reality programming with them, as well as stories for PBS, and just really frontline, just kind of across the board. So does that give you, kind of got my hand dirty in a lot of stuff, and now primarily editing. I like long form editing the best, long form docs the best, and the story consultant stuff I just love.
Oh, excellent, excellent. A lot of history there, a lot of history.
Yes.
I guess I'm gonna piggyback a little bit about the previous question about story consulting. I know someone had a question in the chat about, does the story consultant need to be a filmmaker or an expert in the topic the film covers?
No, definitely not an expert in the topic the film covers. In fact, one of the things I love about filmmaking is every time I work on a new film, it's an opportunity to learn completely about a new subject. So in no way do you have to be an expert. What was the other part of the question, Chris? Sorry.
No, it's cool, it's cool. It pretty much said that, does the story consultant need to be a filmmaker or an expert in that topic that the film covers?
Yeah, I think it helps to be a storyteller, and whether that is somebody who has written, worked on the radio, worked on TV, worked on features, I don't think that necessarily matters, as long as they have a very, very strong basis of storytelling and understand all the components of that. And also all the little intricacies. Editing has so much also to do with not just story, but how you're telling it, how pacing and music and effects. And so no, I don't think you need to have any kind of expertise in one particular subject. But now I'm an expert in not expert, but now I feel like I know a lot of different things because of the various things I've worked on.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I know as a filmmaker, I tend to do this as well. I don't really have just like one steady main editor. I kind of, whoever's available at the time when I'm ready to start editing. When is, I guess from your experience and background, when is the best time for a documentary filmmaker to bring on an editor? Is it best to when you're first beginning, or do you wait till after you finish everything and then get an editor? From your experience and expertise, what are your thoughts on that?
I think probably the best thing to do is have an initial consult, maybe even before you start shooting anything. And just to really be able to bounce ideas off someone else about what you think the story is and what scenes. You should always think in terms of scenes, because we don't want just talking heads. We really have to think about what's on the screen. A story consultant can help you kind of narrow down that kind of thing, of what you need to go after, what you need to shoot, what you don't need to shoot. So I would say in the very beginning, it would be important to have someone. And then for independent filmmakers, often what I'll have people do is go out and do their own assemblies. So do a rough assembly by yourself, if you're able, if you have a, Premiere or Avid or Final Cut, whatever you have, but do a really rough assembly of how you think the story should be laid out. And then I'm working with a fellow now who did that. And it was really very helpful to me because I could see everything that he wanted to include, but it was very obvious to me the things that weren't working or could be stronger placed somewhere else, juxtaposed against another scene. So I think having somebody initially just to go back and forth and then put together some kind of rough assembly and then have a discussion about that, you know, what scenes work, what don't work, what you can do to really, you know, mine the scenes again for that emotional effect that you always going to get, whether it's a comedy or a tragedy, it doesn't matter. There's always some kind of emotional or personal element that you want to bring forth. So, and then at the very end, you know, of course, it's helpful just to make sure that you've accomplished your goal, you know, that you've really, you know, you've done your setup, you've set up the conflict, and how did you resolve it? And is it satisfying an audience? So to then, you know, come in at the very end and see what kind of final things you need to do, whether it be suggestions for pickups. And that's another thing I would say, that it'd be important to have somebody come in, a story consultant come in, not at the very end yet. I mean, that's important, but while you still have a couple days of budget left for shooting, you know, because they may see certain things like, oh, if you just had your character doing this, or if you had asked them this one question, and, you know, if you have a couple days in your budget, or you know that you'll be able to go back and get pickups or whatever, it's really, I think it could be really beneficial to have someone at that stage as well. So it's really, I would say, maybe a 4-step process. But I've worked in all kinds of, you know, I'm really flexible and happy. I really love helping people kind of narrow down what their story is and how best to tell it. So I've come in as just somebody for an hour to talk to somebody, or what I'm currently doing is actually I've taken over a film because the filmmaker just couldn't handle it. I remember somebody here saying that was the case for them. Yeah, this filmmaker was much too close to it and was shooting all kinds of material that didn't support the film at all, and was really just wasting money. And we all know that how important that is for final finishing and, you know, anything else you want to do. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I know I think this happened to me a few times of just shooting. And so now, like I said, just your words of wisdom right there now has me thinking about getting a story editor, a story consultant now for a couple of my projects.
And I think also what goes on a lot, all the time actually, is people have like what I call producer's memory.
Right.
So in other words, you're there, or filmmaker's memory. You were there shooting something and it felt really good to you. And you're thinking, this is going to make a great scene. I mean, I had an instance of this where a producer said, oh, this was great. It was really funny. The guy did, I don't even remember what he did. This is so funny. This is going to make a great scene. And I looked at it, and none of that humor and none of the charm came across on film. And she was convinced that there was something there. And I said, no, take a look at it again. Take a look at what you actually got. And a mentor of mine had a saying, something like, you know, it's not real unless it's captured on film. In other words, an audience doesn't know. They're not going to bring all this information to it, all the information that you have in your head about a particular character, about a particular story. It's only what you have up on the screen.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes, you know, as filmmakers, you know, we get caught up also in software, you know, like, you know, Final Cut was the thing at one time, you know, what Sony Vegas, whatever, you know, now I think, you know, DaVinci Resolve, because you can do editing and coloring. You got Premiere out there, you got Avid. I guess talk about that, figuring out what software, editing software is right for you. You know, how do you determine that?
Well, since I started out actually editing film, like really splicing film.
Oh man.
To me, it's all like, take me back to the old days. But I'm a firm believer of, you know, the tools don't matter. It doesn't really matter what you're most comfortable with. I was a firm believer in Avid for a long time because that seemed to be industry standard, broadcast standard. I do a lot of films for television and broadcast, and everybody was using that. The past year or so, I've been doing more and more independent films, and it seems like those people are more comfortable with Premiere. And now I've gotten actually really comfortable with Premiere, and I think it's much simpler, intuitive. It does really everything you need to do. Now, I generally turn my films over to an actual colorist. I don't take my film to the final finishing stages. I guess a lot of that will depend on, your budget, your capabilities, whatever. So I tend to need the simplest. If I could cut, dissolve, zoom into something, out of something, I'm happy. So I think it really doesn't matter. You got to know your story, and from there, the hardware will just, it'll work itself out. I mean, unless you're really heavy into graphics and things like that, then that's a whole other story. And I don't do very much of that. So that would have to be another session with someone else, Chris.
For sure. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Use what you can use, whatever you're comfortable with, that's what I say.
And I also think the fewer bells and whistles one has, the better. You want the documentary to be the purest form.
Right.
And I feel like there was a couple years ago, particularly, there was this tendency to, have everything wipe and, do all this crazy stuff. And I actually hate that. I think it really takes away from the storytelling and any kind of emotional feel you want an audience to have with your story. So I'm like not for any of the bells and whistles. So give me, just an old fashioned whatever. And I'd be happy editing on that.
Great.
Because I want to make one other point.
Go ahead.
A lot of people come out of school now and they think they call themselves editors because they know how to use the machine. And sometimes they are quite good. Sometimes they do have the right instincts and they do understand story and pacing and things like that. But most often they can do things really, really fast, but not necessarily tell a good story. So again, I'm not to harp on the story thing, but I'm all for, making the tools are interchangeable for me.
Totally. I know another thing, I was, trying to edit some footage for my own documentary. And you know how some writers get writer's block. I guess I call it editor's block, where you just get stuck and you're like, oh man, what do I do to get this thing moving forward? Talk about some of the ways that you deal with that and some tips that you can offer some of our editors out there.
Oh, I think the best thing to do is to go out to a really good bakery and buy yourself a sweet. That's what I usually do. I either take a walk or and then just treat yourself to something. Just get out of the edit room. Because I feel like what happens was we get into the kind of the minutia of editing. And, I find myself futzing with, oh, let me bring it up 5 more frames. No, 5 frames back. And should I bring the music in here? Oh, maybe a beat later. And you get just caught up in those, like I said, the minutia of it all. And you can't really see what you're doing. So I find taking a break completely away, not just stepping away from your edit machine, but stepping outside of your house or your office or wherever you happen to be. And like I said, I'm not kidding. I really do usually go treat myself to something, take a long walk, jump in the shower, cook a good meal, whatever. And oftentimes I find more than not that when I come back, I either know how to fix something or it wasn't a problem to begin with. Something I think because I get so caught up in trying to make something perfect that it wasn't really a problem. And then having that distance from it, you come back, you look at a scene fresh and you go, oh, that wasn't so bad. I could move on. Right. Or I could, there may be 1 or 2 things that, you thought of that you could adjust a little bit. But I would say the biggest thing is to force yourself to get away from the machine, because I think we tend to think that we have to be editing all the time. If you're not editing, you're not you've got this deadline,
Yeah.
even if it's a self-imposed deadline.
Yeah.
It's like you always have to be there and do it, but don't. It's torture. So yeah, go treat yourself to something. Get out of the edit room.
Yes, when working with directors, and some directors were kind of like me when I was coming up. We were just filming stuff. We had no structure of how we gave the drive and everything. I guess for an editor, what is something that you I guess when you're working with a director of them giving you those files, and how would you like those things structured? What's the best way for structure for your workflow to begin that process of editing the documentary?
I think, firstly, I like to get some kind of written, if they have, outline, or some kind of treatment, some way to communicate to me what it is they want from their film. And then oftentimes, as we said before, what producers, directors, filmmakers think they have is very different from what we get. So then I like to actually sit and screen everything. And even if it looks like the camera is swinging around and things are out of focus, and just watch it, because you could get there could be this little gem in there, and it could make or break a scene, but you won't see that if you're just like, oh, let me fast forward because this is all them, putting an engine in a car or whatever, but really watch it and really listen. And so that's the first step. That's, after an initial discussion with the filmmaker of what their goals are, and trying to, and really say, all right, this is the story you want. This is the best way I think we could achieve it. Then go and look and screen everything. And what I tend to do, and many of you probably have different ways of organizing your material, but I like to make different bins or folders or buckets. I mean, people call them all different things that are representative of a particular scene that I have, for instance, something I'm working on right now, I'll use these 3x5 cards. They're your best friend. A Sharpie and a 3x5 card and a bulletin board is seriously your best friend. And I know it sounds like an ancient way to do things, but it's the best. Anyway, so I break down my scenes. I write them down according to, as I'm screening them. And then I will make buckets or bins, as I said, which would say, for instance, this is, Miriam character recording session down by the river. So anything that related to that scene, I would put in that bin. So as I'm screening, I go through and I mark with asterisks if something's really good. If there's a great piece of audio, I always mark that, because sometimes you really need help getting out of a sticky situation with audio, as Eric could probably attest to. And so I tend to, make comments. It allows you in the bin to make comments and mark what's good, or, oh, this could be a good transition to this scene. Ideas that you get as you're screening, which you may not ever use, or it might really save you. I have found both of those things to be true. But anyway, so I organize everything into bins, and then I'll have bins that just say, exteriors, New York. Let's say my film is taking place in New York. Exteriors, New York. Exteriors, Soho, whatever it happens to be. Right. And just the more you could break it down, the better it's going to be. I mean, I'm not a super organized person generally, but I've really learned once I start editing, if I'm not, it's a killer. It's really, really hard to go back and, oh God, I knew there was something that person said, but if you didn't mark it. And then I'll also make selects, what I call selects bins. Again, a lot of this is probably familiar to you guys, but all the sound bites, I'll put together a select bin. Now, I don't personally, my own choice is not to string. I know a lot of people like to just string things out. Like you'll just string out, I don't know, everything in a particular that relates to a particular scene.
Right.
I like to actually keep my shots separate
Mm.
and then go back and, because sometimes you see a different way to cut them. It's
Right.
not the way that necessarily happened in real life.
Right.
So that's the way I don't, does that answer your question, Chris? That's kind of the way
Yeah.
I organize things. And
Yeah.
then of course I'll have my music bins. I personally like working with music right from the get-go
Mm.
because it helps set a mood.
Right.
And I think if you could capture that mood right away, it's awesome because it really helps you, for me at least, it
Right.
really helps motivate my storytelling and my thinking about pacing and
Right.
things like that. So yeah, I'll have bins for music, I'll have bins for sound effects.
Let's talk about that, because I know we talked about previously. I work with a guy I've been working with for a while, composer, and I know with him and some composers, and some editors, like the editor, they want like some type of composition, they work that way, and then the composer is like, well, I need to see the film first before I can do something. So when you're just talking about how you say, what, I'll cut to some temp music, so I can kind of give you the pacing and the vibe that I'm going for. Talk a little bit about that, about working with a composer and with music with your edit.
Yeah, it is kind of a chicken and egg thing.
Right.
But I think that what I tend to do sometimes is if I know, for instance, I'm going to be working with a particular composer, I'll often ask him for some scratch tracks of things that he just has in his library that he's composed for other films.
Right.
And I'll say, I need something that's melancholy, or I need something that's, upbeat and funky, or I need, whatever it is. I'll give him that mood, and then he'll provide me with maybe 20 different cues of things that he's composed in the past, but that meet the particular need and mood that I need. And in some ways it's great because it makes it a lot easier for them, because sometimes they could go back and just with a few little tweaks, if the music is working, with a few little tweaks, change the cue enough so that we're not actually using a cue that someone else has used. And that's a huge time and money saver. So I've worked a lot of different ways. Sometimes I'll just, go on a music library site and pull down, you could always search in terms, I always search in terms of mood, or, genre, tempo, and I'll just pull things down for free from a site and plug things in. Sometimes I'll take things from feature film soundtracks, which is like, don't do that. It's like, I've done that one too many times, and it's awesome because it's this big music and everything is, but you can't use it. And then when your composer gets it, they feel kind of hamstrung, it's like, wait, nothing I do is ever going to be as good as like Hans Zimmer or something, it's
Right.
like, there's no way. So it's really, yeah, but I do it anyway, just because it gives me that, even if I take it out,
Right.
sometimes the composer wants you to take the music out because they want to bring something fresh to it.
Right.
And sometimes they're completely off base. Like, no, that's not what I intended. But sometimes they come up with, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, that's actually really cool. So yeah, I do a combination of, of library tracks, things that I just have that I know of, like, oh, I like such and such a song by someone, I'll throw it in. But yeah, if you have a particular composer that you have a relationship with and you like, having them give you stuff from their library is great. And also I would suggest for filmmakers that, I know budget is always an issue. There's a lot of really, really talented people coming out of film school now that are awesome composers that don't have the credits.
Right.
So they don't get the big opportunities. But I would totally encourage using those people. It's a great opportunity for them, and possibly save you a lot of money.
Ooh, so pretty much, just kind of look at some of these film schools, like, the School of the Arts in North Carolina and Tisch, those type of places.
Absolutely. Like there are a lot of places, I'm sorry, I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I know a lot of schools now have motion picture and audio department. And people are studying film composition specifically. So yeah, you know, you could probably search that pretty easily on the web.
Right.
You know,
Cool.
schools that offer that, or SCAD, the Savannah
Yeah.
College of Art and Design.
Yeah.
Is a good place. I found some people through there too, as well as if you need animation or something like that. It's a great way to, you know, get young people on board that are really talented. They just don't
Yeah.
have the credits yet. So you guys could be the one to give them the break.
That happened to me, you know, with my first project. The guy that did my opening title sequence, he was going to SCAD at the time. And, you know, because he was tired of working on school projects and he wanted like a real world project. And the same with my composer as well. I think my film was his first feature documentary. And so we still have that relationship. I still work with both guys to this day, and it's 8 years later. So we're still working with each other. So yeah, and they've gone on to do some amazing things as well. Also, Bonnie, I know you shared with me some of those music libraries. I'm gonna share this with everyone in the chat box, by the way, right now, of some of these free. I think it was like free just to sign up for
them. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I think you sign up for free, and then they allow you to download. Download the pieces.
Cool. Yeah, I just shared those with everyone in the chat box for those who are interested in using that for your edits. I guess after this question, we have a few questions from folks that are tuning in right now. But I know the big thing now, you know, is doc series. You know, a lot of streamers, a lot of folks wanting to do series now. I'm still kind of weary of it. You know, I'm scared of it right now because I guess just documentary is my lane, the standard documentary. So what's the right approach when folks want to do a series? And I know it's different. You can't edit it the same way. So what approach should a filmmaker take when editing a documentary series versus a standard documentary feature?
Well, what I have found with series, and I've done things from 3-parters to 6-parters, is that one of the things that you have to always think about are cliffhangers, because the network, that's the big thing with series. You're always dealing with a network. And once that happens, it could be pretty monstrous. So you have to figure, and since they're the ones paying the bills, you have to figure out a way to kind of appease them, but not lose your own soul in the process.
Right.
And oftentimes you're working towards acts, and each act has to have some kind of cliffhanger at the end. So it forces you into a different way of thinking. You know, if you were just doing a feature, you would certainly have your ups and downs in terms of pacing and things like that, but you wouldn't have to end and cut to a commercial and make sure people come back. So I can't tell you how much that is always emphasized, you know, by the networks. It's like, oh, what about the cliffhanger? You know, it needs to be stronger, it needs to be longer, it needs to be, and then, so you always have to think in those terms. And since most acts are anywhere between, I would say, generally 6 and 10 minutes, it's a different way of kind of thinking what to include in each act.
Right.
That makes sense, because you'll have to reach a certain point by a certain time. And it's usually exactly to the time frame, to the time code. Right. You know, at 10 minutes, 30 seconds, 18 frames, we're going to commercial. Wow. And so if you don't have that cut to right there, you're in trouble. They'll send it back to you.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, they have, what's it called? Oh God, they tech check, whatever it is. They go and they review all those things. And if you're not right to your time, they send it back and say, fix it. and that's really hard to do. And you find yourself sometimes like, I don't want to lose that, but I don't want to lose that, but you've got to get like 5 seconds out. Yeah. And those 5 seconds is hard. It doesn't sound like it's much, but it could really be hard.
So how do you, you know, when you're trying to deal with the director and you're the editor and he said, no, they're saying I have to keep this in there. We need to do this. Like, how is that relationship doing that to really explain to them, hey, we have to meet these marks?
it could be tense. I say sometimes you really have to be a good politician as well as a good editor.
Right.
You know, you have to know how to make compromises, and you have to know how to persuade someone that the way you're doing it is right. If it is, you know, sometimes I'll say, well, we've got to lose 10 seconds. What do you want to lose? And they'll tell me. And if I think that's a really critical thing, no, you can't lose that, then I will try to come up with something else. And it really is just a back and forth dialogue. And you have to, sometimes it's not worth the fight. Right. Sometimes it really will be like, well, that was really important. That took me all day to get that shot. Well, an audience doesn't know that. And it's kind of a shitty shot. It might have taken you all day on that jib or whatever, but it's not a very good shot, and that's the thing I think the directors and the producers have the hardest time with, because they can't divorce their experience in the field with what's on the screen. Right. And so that's where the editor has to kind of come in and play kind of bad guy.
I agree. Totally agree. We're going to go ahead and take some questions from folks. I know, Tino, I know you had a question in the chat box. Do you want me to read it, or you want to go ahead and ask Bonnie?
I'll come off mute.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Bonnie, for everything that you've shared.
Sure.
This will be my first, the documentary project I'm working on will be my first time working with an editor. So this is something I'm thinking a lot about. And the question I had in the chat was about, you were talking about kind of editing style. And while you were talking, it occurred to me like, oh, all editors bring a certain, I'm assuming, style to their editing approach. And it didn't occur to me until just listening to you now. So now I'm thinking, how would you describe your kind of editing style and aesthetic, and how can we as directors be in addition to, watching what editors have worked on to get a sense of their aesthetic and style, what questions or things should we be asking to kind of make sure that there is like a match, right? Because like, let's say my project wants to include a lot of like animation of Afrofuturism, space, whatever. And you're like, yep, that's not my gift. That's not my
thing. Right.
Better to find that out sooner than later. So what can you talk about, either your own experiences with having those conversations, or what kind of conversation should we be having with editors about to kind of get a sense of what's a good match?
That's a really good question. I would say that an initial well, two things. One, definitely watch other things that they've done. And see if they tend to use, let's just say, a lot of effects or a lot of fast cutting, or whether they like to work in verite more. There's some editors that do like strict like follow docs in verite, and they're very good with that kind of material. And then there are other people that do more historical narrative doc, like more of a Ken Burns type of editor. And that's like a whole other discipline, because they're used to working with stills, and they're used to just using different resources to tell their story. So a lot of times I think just an initial conversation with someone to see the types of films that they've worked on, look at some of those films. And sometimes people won't have, again, if you're beginning, if you want to work with someone who's relatively new to the field, they won't necessarily always have a lot of things to show you. But I think sometimes you could just get a sense from a person's personality. And, if they seem calm and not like, oh, or combative, or, there's some editors that get very tense and they don't want a director sitting behind their shoulder. They want to be like, just give me an outline or tell me what you want, then let me go for it. And sometimes you get gold and sometimes you don't. That's a tough question. I think it's more of an interpersonal, meet with the person and see if you get a good vibe from them. Because I think a good editor will be able to adapt to whatever, unless it's something like for instance, I don't think I would be hired for like a music video, for instance. I could do it. I've actually done a couple, but it's not my thing. I like more, slower kind of character-driven, not slower, but character-driven documentaries, stories with a little complexity, that you could sit with and really learn from and help develop. I love playing with pacing because that's really, really important. And if you have a full-length documentary film and you're thinking of using someone who's only done shorts, that's a whole different ballgame. The pacing is a really different ballgame. So I would encourage you to try to find someone, if it's a long form doc, that has, long form experience. And then a lot of it is just feeling, I think. A lot of it is just a feeling from the person, I think. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it did. I mean, it seems it's both kind of the portfolio, the kind of the toolbox and the skill set of the editor, but then to your point, it's like any other crew, role. It's like figuring out the chemistry, and so I think that's also important to remember.
Yeah, I think the chemistry thing is really important because, there's definitely going to be some tense moments, because sometimes you're going to disagree with someone, or you're going to be under a tight deadline or whatever, and you want someone who can kind of go with the flow. And yeah, there's a lot of different editing types out there, from the very, very kind of compulsive anal type to the more like, oh, let's just see what happens in the editing room, So a lot of it it's that's really a personal feeling, I think. If you like the person, you could stand working with them, I think, if you like them personally. That's all I got for that.
Cool, great question, Tino. Elijah, I know you had a question as well. Hold on. Abed, yeah, you had a question first.
You want me to go first?
No, yeah, you go ahead, and then we'll go to Elijah. Go ahead.
So many questions that I would like.
Go ahead.
For 2 hours. My first question is, how do you, I usually shoot my documentaries and the footage can be a little bit messy, and sometimes I'm not very proud of them, but when you put them together, they can and they have made great films. Now, how do you talk with an editor when your footage can be very messy, they don't make sense, sound might not be great, and so on? Another question is, how do you, when you shoot your documentary, you direct also and you edit your own documentary, what advice can you share in terms of how to approach the editing aspect if you shoot and edit your own documentary? Or can you remove yourself from being the cinematographer and now to work as an editor? And last question, very last one. Now there is a movement in the film industry or the documentary industry to have diversity. For example, if you're telling a story about a specific community, you want to make sure you can include people not just as character, but also as maybe crew to work on this project. Now, sometimes it can be hard to find composer, editor from the community. How do you deal with that?
Okay. That has me stumped. Your last question has me stumped. Because I always want to work with whoever's the best person for that job, regardless of, color, religion, nationality, whatever. And I understand, that's not to say I don't understand and completely support diversity. I certainly do. But I think that you always want the person who's going to be best for the job, and so I guess maybe I would, for instance, if I wanted to work with a composer, someone who was into editing, I would maybe go to a historically Black college, for instance, like Howard University, or there's a place in North Carolina, NCCU, and ask specifically about their communications majors. Do you have any people that, want to get into this field or have done their own films? I'm trying to think of a way to, because how do you reach those people, right? I mean, I think that's the hardest thing. So yeah, I don't have a really good answer for you for that one. I'm sorry. But
Maybe the question would be, would you, I guess I understand your answer. Would you prioritize having a person that has the skills that you need, or would you go for, someone that is part of the community and I don't know,
I
might not.
think I would go for the person who's part of the community with the stipulation that, depending if it works out or not, with the stipulation that, if they don't have any experience, let's say, or very little experience, I would say, maybe let's do a trial run, see if we both get along and see if our sensibilities match or something like that. And in terms of what you were asking about the sloppy camera work and stuff like that, I've worked with lots of stuff that's been really horribly shot, but I think if you're you can make it work somehow. Sometimes it works to your advantage because there's a certain rawness in it, and in that rawness is reality, and I think that I wouldn't throw stuff away just because it's out of focus or shot poorly or whatever. And I think a good editor would be someone who could help figure out a way to use stuff that you might think, oh, I blew this, we can't use it. Don't throw anything away. Let somebody look at it first and analyze it and look at it with a different eye than you have. What was I'm sorry, your first question was?
How do you deal with being, the cinematographer, director, and also editor? How do you remove yourself from those two roles and to just focus on being an editor?
That's a really hard one too, because again, although I do know some really successful people that shoot and then edit their own films, but what I've heard is that it is really, really difficult because again, if you have shot it, you have that whole emotional experience of having been out in the field. And sometimes it's hard. And since you still have, you're going to bring that to an editing room, that feeling of, oh, this was a great scene. The character said this really well. And then it's going to be harder for you, I think, to look at it objectively and to say, oh, this actually isn't very good. So I don't think it's a great idea for a producer director to edit their own stuff. It is, as I said earlier, important, I think, for them to put like an assembly together, for them to definitely give it their best shot. But then I think, an experienced editor should come in and form it, shape it, pace it. Because I think the skills one needs to be a great cinematographer are not the same skills necessarily you need as an editor. Although I think the best editors are cinematographers. I've noticed it because they know how to shoot for a scene. I had an experience with a guy who was shooting something for me, and he had been an editor, and he really knew what I needed to make a scene work. And it said that, for instance, I'll give you, this is exactly what it was. It was a doctor standing outside of an elevator, waiting for the elevator to come, right? Most people would just set it up wide, wait for the elevator to come. This guy, he moves constantly, so he would get your wide shot, he would get your medium shot, but then he would also move in and move with the guy's hand when he put the button, when he pressed the button, and then move to the elevators when they opened. And to be really fluid like that is a real gift. I mean, it's really hard to do, but it's a real gift, but also makes it so much easier for the editor. Because I was able to cut that scene that was maybe 5 or 6 different shots, where a lot of cameramen I know, I promise you, I would get 1 or 2 shots. And it'd be like, what the hell? How am I going to turn this? How am I going to make this into like a scene as opposed to just a shot? And that's what I think what I'm always trying to do is turn something more into a scene, give it a little more significance than just having it as a shot. Does that answer your question?
Very well, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome, and good luck.
Thanks, Obed. Appreciate it. Elijah, are you still there? I know you had a question as well.
I'm still here. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So what I typed in the chat, I actually just basically had answered, which is awesome. answer for me. Appreciate that. I'd actually like to ask something, switching gears to something we talked about earlier, which is the concept of story consultants, right? Which is, in my limited experience, can be an invaluable resource. That being said, it is, the tale as old as time for independent creators that budgets are limited, in some cases, very limited. And so it's sort of a difficult decision, I think, for younger creators to decide at what point can or should I bring in some external eyes that I'm paying, and to what degree would you advise, for example, people that are working on projects with limited budgets to say, okay, maybe you should get an hour here right before you start, but then you should hold off and wait, go ahead and start. Recognizing resource limitations, what is your take on the best gain that earlier or limited resource creators could receive from a story consultant, but still balancing things so they're not, swimming in debt, as it were?
Right, exactly. I've done things like have an initial consult, which could be as little as a half an hour. Someone could send me, let's say you would send me an outline for film or a proposal or whatever you have, something in written form. And I would take a look at that and then have a certain set of questions. And we could talk for like a half an hour, 45 minutes. It wouldn't be a big deal, but I could make sure that you're thinking along the right lines in terms of getting what you're going to, shooting what you're going to need in order to tell the story you want to tell. And then I would kind of go away and then, have you do your thing. And then, as I was saying before, when you get to maybe an assembly or a rough cut, then bring the story consultant back in. And at that point, they should be able to see the structure that you're thinking of, be able to see, the story pretty clearly and what the stakes are for the character, how, their conflict is resolved in the end, and then talk you through, maybe that's only for an hour. Somebody screens, let's say you have an hour film, so they screen it for an hour, then maybe make some notes for you for another hour, not even, and make some suggestions. Oh, you wanted to do this, but I think it would actually be stronger if you switch these two scenes around. So I think, in the very beginning, it's helpful because it could really save you from shooting some things you don't really need to shoot. And towards the end, it helps you narrow and focus more onto what your story is and how you could, maybe do some additional shooting, whatever, to bring it home. So I think that would probably, I think that would be the best way, right up front, and then somewhere after your initial rough cut. And then at the very end, just to make sure you've achieved, what you wanted to achieve. And then at the end, I also often give tips for like pacing and things like that, because sometimes, particularly beginning storytellers can get not quite see how a story can be enhanced by music or by cutting, a fast scene next to a slow contemplative scene and things like that. So we could do that kind of fine cutting at the end. But yeah, no, I feel you with the budget. I know that's a big problem for everybody. But you should get in touch with me and we could, I'm really happy to work with people and to whatever kind of suits whatever their needs are, whatever their budget is, within obviously some parameters. But yeah, we could talk, if you're interested, we could talk more about that offline and see if we could get something together that'll work for you.
And also,
thank you.
Yeah.
It also, Elijah, and everyone also on this call, I know, Bonnie, we've talked about this as well. You wanted to, send out, let people know, how they can reach you for your services as well with story consulting. So, we'll definitely send you guys in an email, her info, if you want to, take this conversation even further with your project.
Right. Yeah, and I'd love to get, all your emails and, we could reach out. And again, if anybody wants to just chat for 15, 20 minutes free of charge, please feel free to call me.
Cool.
Sign me up for that.
Definitely. I know I'm signing up too. So, Devin, I know you had a question. We'll take this question from Devin, and then after that, if anyone else has a final question as well, and so we can wrap it up. But go ahead, Devin.
Thank you. And again, Bonnie, I just want to thank you again for your time. My question is, like, when you're working on a scene and it's just not working for you, like, is there a to-do list or a checklist or a method that you kind of like refer to kind of work your way through it? Like, how do you go about solving like that type of issue?
Well, first I step back and really try to analyze what it is that's not working in the scene. Is it that the pacing's off and it's just kind of not feeling right? You're not getting the emotional impact out of it, or whatever it happens to be. Try to step back and look. Is it the actual cutting? Is it the shots you're using? Is it the fact that there's not enough movement in it? Is it the fact that it's not moving your story forward? Try to analyze it. And sometimes I'll like throw something out completely, or I'll throw a scene that I was convinced it needed a certain kind of music, but it's just not working. Try something completely wacky and different. And sometimes you'll be pleasantly surprised with, like, oh shit, wow, that brings it to life. That's a tough question. There's no real order of I don't know. I guess I've been doing it for so long. A lot of what I do is instinctive, and I find it difficult to explain sometimes.
Well, it's a great answer though, because that's seriously what I'm looking for, right? Like, I'm looking for like a singular thing that I might be able to add to my arsenal as well. So like adding something, like throwing something wacky in there, right? Never really thought about that before, right? There's something that can kind of go in there. So that was actually perfect, yes.
Okay, good. Or try to throw in a couple like animated stills, or I don't know, just try to see it in a whole different way. Yeah, good luck. That's a tough one. I've been faced with that a lot. Anyway, anything else?
Yeah, I think Pat, you have a question, right? Do you want me to just go ahead and read it from the chat, or do you want to ask the question?
Well, I just really wanted to know if you made each scene perfect before you move to the next, or do you do a big rough cut and then go back and then work each scene?
Yeah, that's a good question. Most of the time I do it pretty rough. But I do like, in the beginning, when I start something, I'll sometimes get an idea for a particular scene that I know. I keep coming back with examples of this film I did about, it was a 3-part series for PBS about fetal surgery. And what it was about doctors who correct birth defects while the baby is still in the womb. And I knew that there were certain, so it's very touching, it's very emotional. And I knew there were certain scenes that I wanted to play out a certain way, and mainly things like time passing. We had this one mother who had to go back and forth to the hospital to see her baby once it was born. And it's like, how do you do that time passing, right? So I knew I wanted to have a montage of, getting in and out of a taxi, looking contemplatively out a window, opening a door, lifting the baby, kind of a montage. And I knew it needed a certain type of music to be really touching. That's the kind of scene I like to tackle, like fine cut right off the bat, because usually things like that have some kind of emotional, you could tell I'm always talking about emotions, but some kind of emotional edge to it. I like sometimes to fine cut to see if I got it, but generally I will rough cut something, I'll do, a string, not a string out, but, a rough cut. Because oftentimes you don't really know exactly how you want the scene to feel, or what it's going to be juxtaposed next to, So yeah, I kind of play it both ways. Sometimes I like starting, as I said, to actually really edit something finally, because it gives me inspiration to keep going. It's like, oh, there's hope for this film. You know, or as if I cut everything really roughly, sometimes I feel like, oh, this is all, this is just not making it, you know? So I really go both ways. A lot of it really depends on the subject matter at hand and how I'm feeling that day. And if I have a good piece of music to work with, that always helps me.
Great, thank you. It sounds
Yeah.
like music plays such an important role in your editing.
It does. It really, really does. And even if I have to end up changing it or losing it, it just sets the mood right for me. And even if it's just like an ambient, you know, a piece of ambient sound, and I don't mean like wind or so, I mean like a ambient piece of music that's just kind of a score, a low score underneath, just helps. Yeah, it helps me a lot.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Oh, yes, you're welcome. Good luck
Cool.
with all your films.
Cool. All right. We got time for just one more question if anyone has a question. Go ahead.
It's really kind of like a two-part question. Are there any documentaries where you feel like they're really cut well, that's just out there now? And do you get inspired by certain documentaries?
I do. And it's oftentimes documentaries where I feel like, oh, I wouldn't have been able to do that. Right. You know, like, I know this is going to sound silly, but I watched a film about, it wasn't Taylor Swift, but it was someone like that, Pink. You know, it was a great documentary. I'm not a Pink fan.
Right.
But I watched it anyway. I was just curious about it. And it was really, really well done. And there were certain certain things that the editor did. I don't remember if it was a man or a woman, but it's like, wow, that is really good. I never would have thought of that, you know? So that does kind of give me inspiration, but I also know my own limitations. And even though I try to surpass those things each time, you know, and get better and better, I know that there's some things that just kind of aren't in my wheelhouse, you know, and but in terms of documentaries to watch now, that's a tough one. There's so many, and I can't think of any of them. I'll have to think about that. I'll email you.
No worries.
Cool. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it. All right, Bonnie, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Like I said, everyone, we have a couple of links in the chat box for some of those music libraries that Bonnie mentioned earlier. Also, Dana put Bonnie's website in there as well. If you want to look into more of her work, contact, and we're also going to email you her information as well, just in case you don't get it in the chat box today. But again, Bonnie, it's been a pleasure talking with you about this. I always learn so much when I'm talking, you know, with you, and I'm always trying to learn as well and just get better as a documentary filmmaker. And just having someone like yourself that's willing to give their time and insight, it means a lot. It means a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to SDF and also folks that are here tonight with us as well.
Thank you so much. And
any final words or any before I let you go? If you can, I guess, talk about it a little bit. What are you working on right now?
Oh, that's secret. No, I'm just kidding. I'm working. I just finished up a couple. Actually, this is really not the kind of thing I'm used to doing at all. There's a lot of kind of wellness videos now, you know, about meditation and self-help and things like that. So I just finished up a couple short films one was really interesting. It was a meditation, but what they did was they were just using music and images. Believe it or not, it was of glass blowing. And so you would hear, you know, the I don't even know what you would call him, the meditator, I don't know what, the teacher's voice. But then I had to cut these very flowing, beautiful scenes of glass blowing. And it was so cool. It was like unlike anything I had done for quite a while, but it was all music and effects and visuals. and then just laying the teacher's voice over, pace it out so that it feels right. So that was kind of fun. So I did a couple of those. And now I'm editing a feature doc. This was the one that I was brought in initially as a consultant on, that the filmmaker feels like he's in over his head. And I could say a little bit about it. It's basically about a woman in France who studied in America, but she wants to be an Orthodox rabbi. And in France, you cannot, there are no female Orthodox rabbis. It's kind of against their rules. So it's a story of her trying to achieve, some place in the Orthodox Jewish community, and all of those things that she's up against. So yeah, that one, I'm just starting back up on it again next week. The producer went to France for a month. He only needed a couple scenes. He went to France for a month, and I'm sure I'm going to have tons of footage that is of no use. But anyway, I'll let y'all know.
Yeah, definitely keep us posted on that. I would love
will.
to see how that turns out. I guess final thing is, when you were mentioning your history and your background, how you got into editing, I know some folks out here, I know like myself, I thought about maybe not doing directing no more, maybe going into producing. But I know there might be some folks out there that say, you know what, I really want to do editing and do this thing full time and really grow as just an editor. And just so, some people out there just getting into it. I guess, what are some words of encouragement or advice on people that are getting into editing, especially with documentaries? Like what are some ways they can kind of move forward with their careers?
I think watch a lot of documentaries. I mean, Michael, I appreciated your question about which documentaries to watch, even though I didn't have an answer. But I think it's important to watch a lot of documentaries. And kind of, yeah, I think it's important to watch. I think it's important to play with things. If you go out and shoot something on your own, even if it's not part of a bigger film, just say, oh, I'm going to shoot the local bread delivery at our local bakery, and I'm just going to turn that into a scene. Just play with things, and play with music, and play with sound effects, and play with juxtaposition of shots, and try to do things that are a little unusual, like, oh, I'm going to create the scene and it's just going to be close-ups. That's what I loved about the glass blowing thing, because it was all abstract. It was all close-ups. And then you could do some like real, I hate dissolves, but you could do really, unless they're really cool, like unless you could dissolve through smoke and then someone's face comes through it. And, I mean, for artistic effect, I like it. For passage of time, never do it. There's a saying, if you can't solve it, dissolve it. Don't ever do that. There's always a solution.
Right.
But I would say get some footage and play with it, or hang out with editors. I mean, I learned a lot just hanging over the shoulder of a really good editor. When I was still trying to be an editor, I was being their production assistant or something at this little production company. But I would, whenever I could, sit over this guy's shoulder and just watch him. And I saw the way like he used certain things, like if like I love natural wipes, like let's just say, well, the example was there was a forklift that came into the screen and then covered up the whole screen and turned black.
Right.
And I love that kind of thing as transitions.
Right.
I never would have even thought about that if I hadn't seen him do it.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, oh God, I would have thought that was a throwaway. It goes to black. What are you gonna? And I realized, no, that's a brilliant transition. You could go anywhere. So I think sitting with editors, just sitting over their shoulder, and watching what they do. And then, like I said, trying to shoot your own scene and play with it.
Oh, cool. Excellent. Excellent. Hope y'all mind this noise out here. I'm downtown Toronto. They're doing something. But again, Bonnie, it was a pleasure talking with you.
It was great. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
And anybody who's on here, just, hit me up. I'm happy to answer any more questions via email or whatever. I'm, I've got a couple days where I'm pretty free. So if there are any questions you didn't get answered, feel free to contact me. And thank you so much, Chris, for hosting this.
Thank you. No, thank you. Thank you. Like I said, it's just free education for me. I love it, talking to you. So again, my name is Christopher Everett, and this is the Southern Documentary Fund. A great conversation with Bonnie Cutler about editing, documentary editing specifically. So we guys we'll catch you later.
Okay. Thanks so much.
All right.
Thanks,
Peace,
everyone.
everyone.